Welcome to the Bros of Gardening. I'm your host, Mike Westphal, and I'm joined by Daniel and Dyke, my co-host, and Alex, who's going to help keep us on track and ask us a bunch of questions about our topic today, which is incorporating birding into your landscape. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll get to kind of talk about the subject, all the way around the garden, what you can do to kind of bring these feathered friends into your backyard.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's get started. So, Daniel, you're up first right now.
Let's do it.
So when you're designing landscapes, are there any particular plants that you implement when a customer wants to create a bird-friendly yard?
Absolutely, yeah. So, that's a very popular request that we get. A lot of times it goes hand in hand, which is great for birds. A lot of times it's natives and things of that nature that birds like. But yeah, it's a very popular request we get. We always say that people that want to invest in their landscape are usually people who want to enjoy the outdoors. Yep. They want to be out there with it. Obviously, curb appeal is a big one, keeping up with the Joneses a little bit. But a lot of our really passionate customers are all about being outside, and a lot of times that comes hand in hand with birding. So yeah, I'd say just to go through a couple of them. There's a ton of them. First off, there's a lot of plants that will be beneficial for birds.
A ton.
So some of the ones that I try to do, I kind of combine not only plants, but also low maintenance, some that maybe don't require a lot of care that are still going to be easier on the customer. Cause that's always, they want I want this, I want that, but I always want low maintenance. Right, so it's like trying to find that balance. So one of my favorites that great for like hummingbirds and stuff like that is phlox. So phlox is a popular one in the spring. It can be good for hummingbirds. It's good for a lot of different reasons. Also, lantana, perennial lantana is a great one.
Very good one.
That's a good one for birds. Again, hummingbirds love that one as well. Even butterfly bush. Obviously, butterfly bush imply that it is great for butterflies, but it's also really good for birds and stuff like that. And then the more obvious ones are things like elderberry. Yep. Service berry, if you're looking for like a small ornamental tree.
All the berries.
Yeah, all the berries. Service berries are great. We plant a ton of service berries around here. They're super hardy. Natives, they do great in this area. They can take wet feet. They can do a lot of different, they accomplish a lot of different things. And one of the big things they can also do is attract a lot of birds. Obviously, like Mike said, berries, so you get into your hollies and things like that.
Yep.
Again, the beautiful things about hollies, you're not going to find something much hardier than a holly.
Yep.
But they berry like crazy. It gives you good color with the berries. Birds obviously love the berries. Your fruit trees and things like that. Obviously, your birds are going to love that. But, I was talking with Mike about it earlier. He made the point that you might not be nuts about them stealing all your fruit. But at the same time, if you want to, attract birds and wildlife, fruit trees and stuff like that are a great way to do it. And then you can even get into things like, dogwoods and stuff like that they have like a really fleshy fruit that birds will like and stuff like that. So really anything like that will attract birds and get birds into your yard. And a lot of times, just sometimes the insects that certain plants will bring, even if they don't berry and do things like that, the birds will eat the insects and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different ways to accomplish it, and there's a lot of different things that do it. But those are probably some of the more popular ones that really will try to invite some birds into your backyard.
Almost all plants, really. I mean, having a yard with no plants would definitely not attract them.
Yeah, exactly.
So, they need places to hide. They need places to nest. They want to feel protected. I think that's, something that I'll talk about probably a couple more times, which is, that they need to feel like they're in a little bit of a micro environment that they can call their own so that they can feel comfortable feeding and doing their thing, basically. So enjoying the yard. So it could be just a shrub or a large shrub. I mean, I think like Chindo viburnum is one of our favorite hedge plants. Yeah. And those are big green shrubs, evergreen shrubs that they can go in, they can hide in, they can come out of. So there's lots of great opportunities, whether they berry or not, but the berries, the flowers for hummingbirds. I think a lot of people forget hummingbirds when it comes to birding. Yeah. It's such an easy bird to attract just by planting some flowers, some of the trumpet-like flowers, and then we'll get into feeders and all that stuff.
Well, and Mike mentions the trumpet-like flowers. Some of my favorite are like the trumpet honeysuckle, like if you're trying to do a vine and things like that. Classic but, obviously the hummingbirds especially really love those, and they're hardy, and they say they can climb up a trellis, they can climb up a fence. I mean, there's different ways you can apply them, a lot of different ways to do it. So like I said, Mike said, there's pretty much any foliage back there. I didn't even think about like the nesting aspect of it, but obviously I wouldn't associate chindos normally with that, but that's a great point, is that those things can still have that effect as well.
I put one hanging basket on my front porch every year. And what happens? a bird nest in it every year. So even a hanging basket could be a place for a bird to nest in.
Well, and just as a quick aside, is there actually any plants that they typically don't?
Not really. I mean, you think about like probably grasses, maybe they don't really mess with too much. Although I will say if the grass is browning and drying a little bit, they'll use some of those, blades that fall out to make nests out of. There's very few plants that birds are like, I'm just going to steer clear of that. Maybe Mahonia, like the prickly
just
Mahonia.
Because it's,
but even some of the thorny plants like roses.
But Mahonia berries.
Yeah.
So,
there are thorny plants that birds feel comfortable going into because they're just very small. I mean, a lot of the like chickadees and different types of smaller birds have a place that they can go and hide into that is thorny, and they'll feel a lot more comfortable inside. So there's very, very few.
So definitely wouldn't say there's anything that really discourages it. Maybe just some that encourage it a little bit more than others.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. So Mike, if someone's starting out in birding, what's the easiest first step plants, feeders, etc. that you would recommend?
So it's definitely a feeder for me. I mean, I was never really into birding. When I first started gardening, I was more worried about my trees and my shrubs and my plants and everything like that. And then when I took on a different role as a buyer, that was the department I was buying for, was one of my portions of buying was buying for birding. And I started to look at feeders and different types of things and started to get interested in it. And that is the first thing. I mean, you can buy a good feeder, hang it out with some seed and see what happens. And I think a lot of times you'll be amazed at just what you'll attract with just a little bit of bird seed and a nice little feeder. Once you get into it a little bit more, you'll start to recognize some of the problems. Well, do I have squirrels? Do I have raccoons? Do I have things that are trying to get after my bird seed? But those are all things that can be accomplished. So I'd say start small with a feeder. Then you might add on some houses, bird baths, fountains. We'll talk about water and all of that stuff. But so there's a lot of things that you can do to grow it, but start with a feeder. That's the best thing. Definitely, like I said, if you have a yard that doesn't have any plants at all, then you probably want to start with some plants, and I think planting just a small tree, like you mentioned, a dogwood or a purple leaf plum or, a cherry, a Yoshino or Kwanzan cherry, something that's got low branches that you can hang feeders from, but you don't have to have those things either. You can get a shepherd's hook. Yeah. I mean, you've got window feeders and all of these different things that you can choose from. So get a feeder, put a little bit of seed in it. I will say the first thing that I would recommend is buy a high quality seed the first time you buy seed. Okay. I think a lot of people buy, just that, wild bird mix, which is not bad. I'm not going to say that's a bad thing. It's just buy a good quality bird seed for the first time to really entice them into your area. Bird seed is a treat. It is not survival for birds. I think that's an important part to understand too. Point. Is they're not living off of your bird seed. They are living off of a lot of other things, which are a lot of the benefits that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But they're using it as a treat. Winter, you might get them through some tough periods with encouraging birds in your yard with some bird seed, but it is not their primary food source. So you don't have to worry about I've got to feed them year round. I will recommend feeding them year round for the benefits that we'll talk about. But start with a feeder, fill it with some seed. You'll be surprised at what you get.
All right, cool. So, Daniel, what role do bigger features like trees or water sources play in attracting more bird varieties?
Yeah, so I mean, like Mike was just alluding to, I think the water sources are pretty self-explanatory. As far as obviously birds have to have water, they're drinking, just like they're animals, so they have to have water for drinking. But then obviously bird baths, you think of bathing, and they want to clean themselves, and then also just in the summer months to cool down, having a water source nearby is going to be inviting for birds. They get hot too, out there cooking, and so it's funny. We installed. I think we actually have maybe a video of it on our website. But it's a running stream. It was about 65 feet long, and they wanted to encourage a bunch of wildlife. And then there's like a little pond at the end of it, and they said the amount of birds in it is just insane.
Oh, really?
They have tons of birds that just land in there and kind of bathe and dance around because it's very shallow.
That's what I went out to.
Right? It's very shallow. And so they love it. But yeah, I mean, I think, and then also just it can be a source of food, like Mike was saying. Whether it's the trees or the water source, Both of them are going to inherently have insects, not necessarily bad insects, just natural insects that live whether on the tree, in the tree, or in the water source or around the water source. And birds can eat that, and that's a little bit more from a sustainable standpoint, not much as much like a treat as the bird food is. So those would be the big things with water is obviously the drinking, the bathing, and then just like a food source. And then along that same line, the trees are going to be important for cover. They want to feel protected. They have predators as well. So if they can get up in the tree and kind of hide under the canopy of the tree or up in the canopy of the tree, they have to have a place for the nest. And obviously now we start talking about different types of birds. If you're trying to, house a very small bird, then yeah, they can build their nest in a lot of different places. But if you're looking to have, some larger birds are going to need a little bit more substantial space to build that nest. And that's where your big canopy trees will come in. Some of the ones that I know that we've planted that people have talked about are things like oaks and maples and elms and things like that are really good for birds. And I think even, Mike, you might know more about it than I do, but as far as like their actual, the seeds that they drop and things like that, the birds can eat that. And so it's a little bit more of a sustainable food source, I think, for them. But then the big thing would be also nesting and like Mike was saying, just protected up under that canopy and being able to get up there away from some different natural predators and things like that.
Yeah, a little shade from the heat. Yeah. You mentioned water. It's a great point. I mean, the shallow, I think, is the most important thing. Because I think, some people might not even want some birds in their fountains. Like a lot of people say, well, I want a fountain and I don't want the birds in there messing around. Well, then you want a deeper bowl. Some people want a fountain that has moving water that repels like mosquitoes and things like that. And then you just get a fountain with a little bit of a shallower bowl. I mean, a small stream with a low pond. And bird baths are typically no more than 2 inches deep. If you feel like you're not getting a lot of birds, an easy fix is to put a little bit of a rock layer down in the bottom. Clean the rock and then wash it out, just get the dust and dirt off of it and then put it at the bottom of your bird bath or a bowl of something that you might have and then fill it up with water because it'll give them a little bit of a shallower area that they can put their feet on and feel comfortable. I mean, typically they're in there cleaning their feathers. I mean, that's what they're really doing. That's hence the name bird bath, but they're drinking water, they're finding water. And so having a water source in your yard is definitely going to attract more birds.
Absolutely.
Nice. So Mike, what about smaller spaces, though? Say someone only has a patio or balcony. How do they get into birding?
Yeah, I think there's, again, so many opportunities, even when it is small spaces. They'll feel pretty comfortable coming up to a small porch or balcony if you have some of the things that they need. Definitely containers with some plants in it. You need some greenery in there. You need something that's going to make them feel like they can get to somewhere pretty quick if they need to. Right. I mean, I brought up my hanging basket on my front porch. If you just look at my front porch, it's a fairly small front porch, and all I have is a couple hanging baskets, a couple potted plants, and for sure a bird nest in that hanging basket every single year. I don't know if it's the same bird, but it always happens, and I think it happens to a lot of people. So hanging baskets, window boxes, rail planters, containers with a couple small plants. You can do some of those hummingbird things, which is a great way of attracting birds is planting lantana or a vine or, all of these different things that attract hummingbirds that you can plant in a container. That's a first start. Then, of course, a small feeder is going to be a great one. I doubt you're going to, get a lot of nesting birds in houses. So I don't know that I put houses up there. You might try it just because it looks cool. I love using, a birdhouse just almost as a decorative item, just in the yard, just because, we talk about different elements that you can add to the yard. So I'll have like 3 to 5 of a similar birdhouse hanging from a tree because it looks cool. It looks like an ornament on the tree. Mm-hmm. Do I get any birds in them? Not very often, but it's more of just the look and the feel of I've got a whole birding environment out here, whether they use it or not. So in a smaller space, I definitely recommend a small feeder. You can even do a dish feeder, which is a really good opportunity. I think a lot of people, stray away from those when they're talking about, in a yard area, because you're going to have more wildlife. You're going to have raccoons and squirrels and all of these different things in a bigger yard. In a smaller space, a place for a bird to just come up and perch on and eat from a dish, which is just a low bowl with some seed in it. Some people might call it a tray feeder. it's an open feeder that these birds that are passing by, whether it's an apartment or a condo, you can just pass by. They see the tray of food and they'll just stop by and perch there and nibble away and fly off. Nice. So it's a lot of fun to see, and there's a lot of opportunities there in small spaces too.
Well, good.
Yeah, so we had a customer that was they were they had a townhouse, and so their backyard was a little bit smaller, and they had kind of converted it into all one big patio. They wanted low maintenance, things like that. And so we did kind of the same thing. Is we came in and we put in like a bird bath, or it was actually a fountain, like Mike was saying, very shallow bowl. Had like low moving water, so it wasn't like some fountains are like more of a rushing water. And then we incorporated some pots with some we put in like a winter berry in one of the pots and things like that they really just to try to attract as many birds as possible. So kind of what Mike said is you can do that in a lot of different applications. There's a lot of different things you can do to try to do that. And so don't let it deter you from getting into birding, because there are a lot of different ways to do it. I know I've got a back patio that's raised up off the ground, and it's just a deck, and I wanted to have birds out there, and so I attached a shepherd's hook to one of the posts and hung a bird feeder and had birds pretty much all year long. So it doesn't take much. You can get into it pretty easily.
I think you think shepherd's hook and you think got to go in the ground. Zip ties are a great invention. You can zip tie it right to a post of a fence or something, or of a rail, and there you go.
That's
you got yourself a shepherd's hook.
Sweet. I have to remember that one. All right, so now for the both of you, what do you think is the biggest reward for incorporating birding, supporting wildlife, or the joy of watching them day to day?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think in the grand scheme of things, supporting wildlife is probably the right answer. Obviously that's for the environment and things like that. That's definitely the best thing. Encouraging that wildlife. And again, a lot of times that goes hand in hand with natives, which is good for a lot of different things other than just birds. Selfishly, why I put the shepherd's hook up on my patio was so that I could enjoy the birds and things like that. So I think they can be both. I'll take the cop-out answer and say both. But obviously, if I had to pick one, supporting the wildlife, supporting the environment, a lot of times all those things go hand in hand, but that doesn't mean you can't reap the benefit of it as well and enjoy it day to day. I know a lot of times the motivation behind, at least with our landscape customers, is it's not just birds. They want to encourage birds, but I mean, they want to encourage everything. I mean, like I said, with feeders, a lot of times you're fighting squirrels and things like that. But a lot of our customers that are really into nature and enjoy being out in nature, they want the squirrels, they want the raccoons, they want everything. And so when you are selecting different plants for birds and things like that, it's not mutually exclusive in the sense where you're only going to get birds. You are going to attract all that type of wildlife. So while sometimes you might be trying to deter other wildlife when you're getting into birding, a lot of times you're kind of embracing it from a full kind of ecosystem standpoint. And so I think that'd be the most important part overall, but that doesn't mean you can't enjoy the sounds and sights of birding as well.
Yeah, my biggest one is wildlife kind of centric, except it's they will actually do a great job of controlling the bad insects in your yard.
Right.
So if you are into growing plants, you are going to have insect issues on your plants. Mealybug, spider mites, aphids, all of those things, which, then you can introduce like ladybugs and praying mantis. But birds are the number one of cleaning your plants and getting things. So that's why when I mentioned earlier that, feeding the birds this bird seed is a great way to keep their energy levels up, to keep them excited about your space, your yard. And the reason you really want them in your yard is to control some of these bad insects, because they will get into those bushes. They will get into the trees. They're looking for protein and fats, and that's what they're going to get from the insects rather than from bird food. Now, they'll get it from bird food. Don't get me wrong. But really it is their kind of snack. I mean, you see them pecking in your yard and they're looking for worms, but there's ground crickets. There's other insects in the ground that they're into. They're all into your shrubs and your trees, and they'll fly all the way to the highest parts of your trees and get all those insects that you can't even get a spray to if you wanted to. So I think that's the biggest benefit. There are some other flying things that are not considered birds. They're mammals, bats. Bats will eat thousands of mosquitoes a night. So just by encouraging, having a bat house hanging in a tree, you could have up to, 50 bats in a bat house. And these bats will eat mosquitoes all night long. So some people might not want that. Completely fine. But would you rather have bats that fly at night that you rarely ever see? or have thousands and thousands of mosquitoes.
Take the bats.
There are so many benefits. I mean, they help pollinate your plants. They help move seeds around your yard. They help all of that wildlife. So that whole wildlife and nature is all part of birding. And birding, I think, goes hand in hand with gardening, which is why I love it so much, because gardening is, by far the most popular hobby out there. Birding is pretty close.
Yeah,
a lot of people want to do it, whether it's bird watching, enticing different types of birds. And once you get into it, then you'll start thinking, okay, do I want cardinals? Do I want woodpeckers? Do I want blue jays? Do I want bluebirds or purple martins? And I mean, the list goes on and on of all the different types of birds. And then you get into the specific things that they need. Purple martin house. Do I need a gourd? Do I need, I need a tray feeder. I need to ground feed some of these. I need, certain types of feed and certain types of feeders. So it gets really, really fun, and it can become a big time hobby. And I think, getting into it's very easy because, like I said, just a feeder with some seed in it, see what you attract. And then once you get into it, there's nothing more fun. And I've got one squirrel proof feeder that I love, and I hang it on my tree right outside of my bay window. And it is what we do on the weekends when we wake up and have our coffee is we'll watch the birds eat. And it's just so much fun to see the different array that there is around. So it goes on and on from there.
Sure.
Absolutely. You guys have anything else you want to add about birding?
I think that's it. I think I'm ready to expand my birding experience now after hearing Mike talk about it. But no, it's something I've paid a little bit more attention to, obviously from a planting standpoint with our customers, that request becoming more and more popular. So it's growing every day, I think, and it's only going to become more and more prevalent in landscapes and yards alike.
Yep. Get into it. It's easy and it's fun. And we mentioned water.
And it's good for the environment.
It's great for
Absolutely.
Yeah. We mentioned water about, enticing the birds. What if water is causing damage? So we're going to talk about a topic, drainage, which might sound boring, but trust me, if you've ever had drainage problems, it is a big problem. And Daniel is our expert on this one. So we'll have some great things that we'll talk about next week on The Bros of Gardening. Thanks for joining us for this episode, and we'll see you next time.